D.A.D.E.S reads Sci-Fi. The Legacy of Heorot, Chapter 25, Lifecycle. And now the matchless deeds achieved, determined, dare, and done. Christopher Smart, Song to David. Marianne pushed Cadman away. I can do it myself. I'm having a baby, not an operation. Clumsily, she pulled her legs up onto the delivery table. Cadman hovered nervously. Are you sure you're all right? Fine, darling. You look a little sick, though. I just hate leaving the important things to someone else. Trust me, she inhaled harshly, then released the breath as a contraction racked her body. Not much longer now. Jerry patted her stomach comfortingly. Just a few minutes, little soldier. We're almost ready for you. It's all right. She fought to stabilize her breathing, felt her pelvis stretch painfully, then release. She gasped for breath. 10 light years from home and... She labored for another breath. We still don't have a better way to do this. Well, there's a cesarean, invented in BC times, for God's sake! The pain stabbed again, increasing in intensity and frequency. She gripped Cadman's hand hard as Jerry seated her on the delivery table. She settled down into the saddle at the edge that would allow her to sit up and push, with gravity assisting her pelvic muscles. Now breathe. All of Marianne's world contracted to a pinpoint, centered on the ripple of pain that started deep inside her, then blossomed as her hips stretched to make room for the new life. The feeling intensified until it was neither agony or pleasure, but merely sensation. Dimly she heard Jerry say, Cadman, get the hell out of here. But what? Get lost, Colonel. This is probably the only place on Avalon where you are not needed. Marianne, go, stupid, she managed to say before another wave of pain hit her, then another, and a third that broke like a receding wave, leaving her exhausted upon the shore. Breathe, Marnie urged, and wiped Marianne's forehead. The pain was deep and vast, but not like a pain that would mean she was hurt. Her body was built for this. There was a burning, stretching sensation that receded and then strengthened, and she wanted to scream. Breathe! With a start, she realized that she had literally forgotten to inhale. Everything vanished from her universe but the killing pressure in her abdomen, the sensation of a new life struggling through the darkness. The light separated into coherent dots, floated away. Then they weren't dots at all. They looked like tiny fish. Salmon? She almost laughed. What a time to think about. Breathe! This time the sensation was strong, almost like being pulled inside out, a long, shudderingly exquisite moment beyond time. The breaths and the minutes blurred, each a discrete entity, each forgotten as soon as it was gone. Consciousness fogged. How could she stretch so, without tearing? She would die. She would faint. The moment would never end, would go on and on and on. A terrified Joe swam through the darkness, followed and swallowed by a larger something, just a shadowy glass fish shape. A salmon shape, swallowed in turn by something else, larger and more voracious. A Grendel swallowed them both. It looked at her with blazing diamond eyes, challenging her. It fluxed like something out of an M.C. Escher painting, and was swallowed in turn by a mere salmon. But the legs of the Grendel burst through its body, its teeth pierced through, so that as she watched, as she screamed, the salmon became, Breathe! Push! The fragile hallucination vanished, wavered like steam above a hot spring, and was gone. And there was only the reality of breathing. She held and pushed with the strong lower abdominal muscles. There was a shared exclamation of relief in the room, and suddenly the stretching relaxed. The burning cooled. The pain was over. An unbelievably powerful wave of physical relief swept through her. A sensation, cool, moist, rough terry cloth against her face. A sound, a baby, her baby, crying. Her vision was still blurry, but she saw Marnie cleanse a squiggling, red-skinned thing that wailed like a siren, and Marianne's heart melted. She closed her eyes again, and a moment later, Jerry pressed a warm bundle into her arms. Its face was still daubed with blood and fluid, its eyes shut tightly against the strange and terrible world it had suddenly been thrust into. Its hands, just the size of walnuts, were fisted tightly, and Marnie whispered, "It's a girl." She tried to speak, to say, "Thank you for my daughter," or anything at all. Nothing emerged but tears. Just north of the colony, the Miskatonic had been dammed. The new lake rippled in the blue in the hazy light of Tau Ceti. A half-mile across the lake, the water spilled over a dam. When engineering completed the new construction, power would flow from a hydroelectric plant, the dam, the solar cells, the fusion plant. Together they would make the colonists the wealthiest human beings in the history of mankind. They would have energy, land, and the lessons of 300 years of industrial Earth to guide them. A few more years and wealth untold. "I love it," Cadman said, looking out over the artificial lake. "Hendrik has created a miracle. It's the only lake on the island fit to swim in." Sylvia nodded. She shielded her eyes as she peered down the asphalt shoreline. 2 vehicles came toward them at high speed. On the straight, flat road, they moved faster than the designers had expected or wanted. Marianne and Terry were racing motorized wheelchairs. Marianne was a meter ahead. Avalon's newest mother didn't need the chair, but it was fun to be babied. Cadman seemed more at peace with the colony since Jessica's birth. His hair was a little grayer than it had been a year ago, but he stood taller, leaner, an animate extension of this hard and beautiful land. He gazed out over the lake, to where the iron peaks of the northern mountains rose up and tickled the clouds. "Our work is never going to be finished," he said confidently. "Think of what we found lurking in our little corner of this planet." Terry's worked out plans for an expedition to the mainland. "We should go as soon as we finish some of the other work. There's a lot to catch up on." Her eyes searched the sky. "God, I feel so tied to this planet now. I wouldn't want to leave. I really wouldn't." There was a shout from the edge of the lake. Marianne had pulled ahead of Terry. "It's all right, isn't it?" Cadman asked. "About us? About them?" "Absolutely." I look at Marianne. I think about Jessie, a bit of me that will go on after I'm gone. Everything just seems a little righter. And she gave me that gift. I'm glad that we're friends. "We couldn't be anything else, Sylvia." She jumped. A shockwave as loud and sudden as a clap of thunder reverberated across the plain. Marianne shrieked and pointed up into the sky. Cadman whipped his binoculars up. "There she is. Don't you just love rocket ships? Bring her down, Stu." Sylvia spotted a thread of vapor trail as the Minerva began its descent. Now its shape could be seen. Bastard berth of airplane and insurance building. The blunt bucket of a craft that had brought them down a precious few at a time and delivered them to Avalon without an injury or mishap. It hit the lake and skimmed across it like a drop of water on a white-hot plate. It had almost reached shore before its wings touched the glistening blue surface. The clouds of steam rose up with a roar like a muted waterfall. It maneuvered the rest of the way in short bursts. "This is your package, isn't it, Sylvie?" "The very. Nat Geo gave me an early Christmas this year." The Minerva thumbed into the dock, rotated, and locked in. After a moment, the hatch opened, and Hendrik Sills climbed out. "Bumpy ride this time. We may have a storm coming in. Well, let's get the mail in." Marianne and Terry pulled up to the dock. "I win! She cheated!" Cadman glared at them fiercely. "All right, what have you two been talking about?" "Oh, about the same stuff as you and Sylvia." "Then our relationship is doomed." Cadman jumped up on the landing platform and helped Hendrik down. Stu emerged after. He carried a sealed metal box. "We've got the goods here," Stu announced, "but hardier and more patient souls than I are going to have to download and sort them out." "You don't look happy," Cadman said. "Maybe I'm not," Stu said. With good reason, Carolyn McAndrews came out of the hatch, followed by her sister Phyllis. Carolyn's face was tight with rage. They proxmired the E.A.D.O.E.S expedition. "What?" Cadman demanded. "They canceled the E.A.D.O.E.S ship," Phyllis said gently, "and all the others. There aren't any more interstellar flights." "All true," Stu said. "Maybe our pictures weren't pretty enough." "That news is 10 years old," Marianne said. "Nothing we sent to Earth could have got there in time to make any difference." Carolyn glared angrily at Marianne. We know. Her eyes softened. He was joking, Marianne. Not a very good joke. We're all there is, Terry said. He looked down at his wheelchair. Pretty heavy responsibility. I guess I'm glad we didn't know before we'd killed off the Grendels. When too much depends on me, I always get stage fright. Sylvia kept a greedy eye on the computer disk. We're still here, and you're carrying a year's worth of news and a complete encyclopedia update. With all of the data lost in the attack, this is what I've been looking for. And to hell with the Proxmires. What is it? Just what are you looking for? I don't know, she confessed. I can feel things. Patterns trying to make connections in my head. Computers are good at that. We'll see what happens. Yeah, well, you've got your mail. Hendrik lifted a box and carried it down to the pier's end. Marianne stood up from her wheelchair. Sylvia, do you need help? I mean, answering your questions. I get nightmares. I think I know what you're talking about. Something wants to come through. The Samlin and the Joes and the Grendels and... She waved her hand. They go together. It makes my head hurt. Sure, Sylvia smiled. You're on the network. Whenever Jessica can spare you, get on. The conference name is Grendel. Heck, that one's full of stuff. I'll start a new one. Heorot. Hendrik came back for another box. He was preternaturally silent. Cadman caught his elbow and pitched his voice low. Something else? No. Come on. Cadman eased him back from the others. You're the last man I'd... Okay, I'm tired of this, Cadman. His voice had been low-pitched, but it rose now and other voices stopped. Ding dong, the monsters are dead. They're dead. And you'll never believe it, and that's good. But because maybe it means I can take a break. Hey, I haven't been pushing. No, but everybody else has the bug now. Okay, go ahead and worry. There are going to be nightmares, sure, and we'll get over it sometime. Me, I'm finished. Hendrik said, I finished my calibrations on geographics antenna. I have some long overdue fishing to get in, and I'm taking the weekend off. Sure. Alone? Phyllis sighed. I've got a ton of work. Any volunteers? None, Hendrik said, kissing her cheek, so it's just me and Boogie Boy. He never gets nightmares. Zach okayed it. Fine. Go. I went, and it patched me back together. If I knew a cure for nightmares, I'd use it on Marianne. Take your break, man. Hendrik nodded. He hoisted his rucksack over his shoulder and walked way across the dock. He left an awkward silence. Sylvia gazed at her husband suspiciously. Aha, so what was all that giggling about? Can you tell me? Sure, I can tell you. I just can't tell the military arm. What is it? Close your ears, Wayland. Marianne deliberately faked Cadman out and had a girl. We're going to arrange our marriage for our hapless children. We figure our grandkids will have the best genes in the colony and end up ruling the world. We can look forward to a comfortable, secure old age. Aha! It was late. Jessica was 6 days old and out of the camp's communal nursery with all tests completed. She lay sleeping in an elaborate hand-carved thornwood cradle in one corner of the biology lab. Marianne, Sylvia, Marnie, and Zach's wife Rachel shared a pot of coffee. Cassandra, Sylvia shouted. Oh damn. Problem? Rachel asked. No more than usual. The computer's got holes in its head. Cassandra, background search, reproduction cycles, search for all matched to terrestrial forms. That gives her a hobby. Now, speaking of reproduction, Sylvia said over her shoulder, that leaves you and Marnie. Jerry and I are trying. I think I'm too old, Rachel said wistfully. 37 now. Zach and I have just about given up on children. Need positive thinking, Marianne said. Her face suddenly lit. Psychiatrist, heal thyself. She clapped her hands, delighted with the joke. Cassandra, Sylvia called. Find all on reproductive cycle emulations, Joes and pterodons. She bit her lip nervously. The way Cassie was bunged up, I just don't know how much we can expect, but let's see. A few seconds later, file not found flashed in the air. Sylvia said, I'll find it. At least they're in there. Now all I have to do is figure out the file names. Rachel frowned. I thought Cassandra could find anything. That was the general idea, Sylvie said. But the first Grendel trashed part of Cassie's memory, and the worst is we don't know which part. She's got holes the way... Of course, I'm sure you'll find it. Is it really important? Rachel asked. Marianne took out a worn notebook and thumbed through its pages. There was something I heard once. I keep trying to remember. I thought about it during labor, so you know how much it must have hammered at me. You'll think of it, Rachel said. What is it? Marnie took the notebook, browsed in it. I don't know, damn it. I just don't. Sylvia said, nothing on this planet looks quite right. They're aliens, not Earth life forms. We found ducted glands in the salmon that hold stuff that swims around like active sperm, but they might be phagocytes of some kind. There's an embryonic set of what might be a uterus and an ovary. They're squished flat across the intestinal wall, not much more than a pigment. And just when we were making progress, the Grendel mushed up the labs. The only thing I can be sure of is that we're not sure of anything. Marianne watched with her big, trusting eyes. How much had been lost from that brain? Like Cassandra, Sylvia thought, what might be triggered by the right words? The Grendels all appear to be female. They might be parthenogenic, but we don't have the equipment to be sure there isn't something like testes. The pterodons all seem to have both sets of sexual organs, but the Joes, they mate like rabbits, like we do sometimes. Marianne was wrestling with something, face wrinkled as if in agony. And Sylvia was only moments away from prescribing a sedative. Listen, Rachel said soothingly. Stop trying so hard. Close your eyes for a moment. Stop being so serious. I just can't help it. All right, what do you see with your eyes closed? Joes and Samlin and Grendels chasing each other. I don't like it, Rachel. All right, now pull back. See yourself watching that scene in a holotheater. Make the picture flat frame, black and white. Get some emotional distance. Marianne's face calmed. Better. Play circus music in the background. Marianne laughed, clapping again. That's it. It's perfect. Now they look like wooden animals on a merry-go-round. I hear a calliope in the background. Sylvia sat back and grinned in admiration. She had never had a chance to watch Rachel work. Rachel nodded. Now, open your eyes. Good. What did you have for breakfast this morning? Juice and a chicken omelet. Cadman made it. He's a good cook. Good as me. I didn't know. Good. Close your eyes again. What do you see? Samlins and Grendels and frogs. Her eyes flew open. That was really weird. Something Freudian, Rachel? Marnie asked. She might be telling you to jump in the lake. Maybe. Does that mean anything to you, Marnie? Any connection between Joes and frogs? Behaviorally? Reproductively? Ecologically? It's probably some kind of pun. No, it's real, Marianne protested. Something... Diamonds? Marnie giggled. Oh, I just don't know. Marianne sat and stared at the wall. Sylvia's eyes were unfocused. Damn, she said softly. You're right. This strikes a chord. Frogs. There was a special kind of frog. Something I read once. Cassandra, she said. Search string. Frogs. Cross-reference. Joes. Samlin. Grendels. Ladies, Rachel yawned. Zach has nightmares without me to hold his hand. I'm calling it a night. Make it 2, Marnie added. Sylvia, Marianne, till tomorrow. Are we going back tomorrow? Yes, Marianne said uncertainly. Her eyes were still fixed on the whirring space above the hollow stage. Now I want to stay with Sylvia. Cadman will be back for me. There were hugs all around, and Rachel and Marnie left the lab. Sylvia watched the fluxing hollows, occasionally freezing the images. There were versions of tree frogs, and giant African frogs, powerful enough to knock a man down. Pictures of frogs as they fed, and mated, and were spread out under the dissection knife. Sylvia felt something odd and cold and nasty in the pit of her stomach. A frog with nasty habits. She hadn't believed it the first time. But it would. It did work. It did make sense. Oh, shit. Marianne, she said hoarsely. I want to talk to Cadman. Would you find him, please? Bring him here. Marianne backed away from her, eyes wide and frightened. Is something wrong? I don't know yet. Maybe a chance in 100. I hope to God I'm wrong. Because if I'm right, with timing that was surreally precise, Jessica woke up and began to scream.